The end of September and October appears to be a wildcard time frame for this fall's forecast, as I talked about in the last couple of videos as well, and this may allow for an early start to winter. I will go over some of the details of the upper pattern in the end of September through October, and a look at how active it will be and that what might draw temperatures to be below average and maybe an early snowfall as well for some of the Midwest in October too. It appears as we towards the end of September that we may get some ridging into the western portions of the country. That is a positive P&A pattern. And when you have this, you can get some troughing further east into the eastern portions of the country, including the Great Lakes region in the Midwest as well. This would allow for maybe some early frost again across the eastern portions of the Midwest that I did talk about in the first frost forecast video just a few videos ago that you can watch as well. But when you have this troughing into the eastern portions of the country by the end of September, you can get strong enough cold fronts to bring in them first frost and them areas as well. And then as we push into October, it appears we will have a pretty cool pattern too. But the start of it could be the last week of September. There's a quite bit of disagreement amongst ensemble guidance on this happening. But if you get this ridging further west into the western portions of the country, you will get a troughing for the east as well, and that will allow for a warm west but a cooler east. So again, a very divided look. In September, especially as we get to the middle and the end of September, it appears that we will be getting some pretty wild swings in the temperatures because of stronger cold fronts, but also some western troughing that will push through over the coming weeks as well. So a very fall-like pattern. It looks like it will be coming not just in the Midwest but also across the country. Now this model for the last week of September does begin to hint at the cooler temperatures pushing down into the Great Lakes region and into eastern portions of the country in the last week of September, but with pretty warm, above average temperatures into the western portions of the country because of that ridging. So again, a pretty classic pattern for a positive P&A to get them eastern strong cold fronts to push through the eastern portions of the Midwest, but in warm areas in the central in Northern Plains in the end of September. But it all depends on when this pattern change will actually happen because some of the guidance has it being completely flip flopped in the middle of September with troughing in the west but ridging in the east. So again, we will probably go through a pretty big pattern change sometime in the middle to end of September that will bring in this probably cooler pattern and maybe an early winter as well. But probably not as until we get deeper into October. That's when you can get into a more consistent winter like pattern. You want to say obviously it won't be like sub-zero or anything, but we maybe get cool enough for some early snows in the Midwest in October, as early as mid-October further south in the Midwest, rather than in the upper Midwest, so getting snow in early mid-October, not very common. That's actually normal to get snow during that time frame. As we push into October, we will likely begin to see some troughing, which is not really indicated right now on this ensemble for October. But we'll probably get some troughing over the Midwest and the eastern portions of the country, with some ridging in the Gulf of Alaska and into southwest portions of Canada. This is a pretty classic pattern overall to get a jet stream. The polar jet will be to take a big lump northward into Alaska and then a big, I guess you want to say, dive southeast down into the Midwest and then to the southeast portions of the country. This would bring in some pretty big shots of cold air as we move to October. This is a pretty favorable upper air pattern for that to happen. Not a very favorable pattern, I guess, to get, very cold air further west, but at least some of the Midwest will likely get into these cold blasts as well with these strong cold fronts if this upper air pattern would evolve in October. But this will be a very active pattern as well. This is a pretty classic pattern overall where you get a subtropical jet begin to strengthen that also piece together with a polar jet that will likely bring in some large systems in October as well, with pretty far above average precipitation as well for much of the United States, it seems. If so, obviously you can't say if it'll get snow in Iowa in October with any of these systems, but if you can get enough cold air in place, we could be talking about the first winter storm being in October this year rather than November, December. But I do have to say, if you get an early winter storm, that does not mean that winter will be very cold and snowy overall. It likely won't be anyways, but I will have a video on, we dive into the first winter forecast next month. But it appears that we may have an early, I guess, winter you want to say for this things, like I guess for the quarter and snow year, potentially pattern in middle or late fall. But winter, that does not mean that winter will be cold and snowy as well. It actually seems like it's almost opposite if you get an early winter. Because as you can see on this side of precipitation in October, again, pretty wet across much of the United States, even pretty far above average, I guess you want to say, the further south and east to go in the country. But it is pretty dry in the northwest portions of the country. That is because of the ridging that is showing up. But again, you get this polar jet stream will go up north and then dive southeast. And this will bring some pretty cold blasts into the Midwest and northeast portions of the country. It could arrive as early as the last week of September. But if not, at least as we get into October, that's when we should be able to get them colder shots of air. Ensembles aren't showing this yet, but there are some hints. In the second week of September, we could get potentially our first fall cold front of the season in the second week of September, but this is not what would bring the big pattern change in the end of September or into early October as well. So this will be completely different from that. But this is one operational model, which will change a lot. But you can see we get this cold front with pretty far below average temperatures pushing into the northwest portions of the country in the upper Midwest as you push into the second week of September. This model has shown this for a few model runs now as well. Now again, it might not last very long, but either way, it could be our first fall cold front of the season. Now the European model, because I want to do show all the models as possible, it also has a similar thing as well when you have the strong cold front pushing through the Midwest during this time frame. This is even stronger than what the GFS model even has. So again, there's some signs potentially of the first fall cold front of the season. And the plains and Midwest, I guess, states, you want to say, in the second week of September. But again, it's pretty far out from that happening yet. And it could go away altogether. The ensembles aren't showing it too much yet. I mean, this is the European ensembles for the same time frame. And again, it has, above average temperatures for much of the country yet. But I will say, again, ensembles do have a warm bias, especially in the long range. And I do think this will try to trend cooler. This is the model run before, and it was even warmer. So as you look at a model run closer than that, it is already trending a little bit cooler compared to, I guess, the above average temperatures that we saw in the last model run on this model as well. And then if you want to look at the GFS, it doesn't really have much at all. It actually has more of that eastern portion of the country getting into that troughing rather than the upper Midwest. So again, the ensembles are all over the place, but it's interesting seeing the operational guidance showing the first fall cold front of the season. But they can see as we move to the last week of September, this model is beginning to show that positive P&A pattern with that western ridging, eastern troughing in the end of September. This is what will be very interesting, again, to draw in them first frost and first snows, especially as we move to October. So again, a very interesting pattern that we may be getting in just 3 to 4 weeks or so. So winter's coming fast, obviously, with September coming next week. But this is just an overall outlook. We will know a lot more details as we move deeper into next week on what the end of September and into October may do.